They told me stories when I was little, stories that clawed at my sleep and followed me into every winter night. My adoptive mother, Elaine, had a cruel streak that only showed when the wind howled against the walls of our lodge. She used to bend down close, her cigarette breath thick and bitter, and whisper, "Better check the thermostat. Boy, if it's low enough, Frostbite is coming down the mountain, and he'll be looking for you." I'd laugh nervously, but my heart would pound so hard I swore she could see it in my chest. The legend, she said, was older than the town itself. Something lived at the top of the highest peak in the northern Rockies. It wasn't an animal you could trap or shoot. It wasn't a spirit you could pray away. It was hunger, pure and merciless, wearing the skin of a beast. Or at least, that's how Elaine told it. And in those days, when I was barely 8 years old, I believed her. The lodge was an old structure, creaking with every gust of winter wind. But people drove in from miles away just to rent a room and take advantage of the ski trails. We weren't exactly rich, but compared to where I came from, a foster home in Billings, I thought it was heaven. At least, I thought that for a while. Elaine never let me forget I wasn't hers by blood. She'd say it casually, like pouring cream into coffee. "You're lucky, David, and I picked you up. Most kids like you don't end up anywhere decent." David, my adoptive father, didn't argue. He was a retired ski champion, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that filled every room. The walls of the lodge were lined with his medals, trophies, and glossy photos clipped from sports magazines. When guests asked about them, he'd tell the story with a twinkle in his eye. But when it came to me, he just nodded, as if my presence were a burden he tolerated. It didn't take long to realize I wasn't their son. I was their help. I swept floors. I carried luggage. I chopped firewood. And all the while Elaine smiled only when I flinched. Only when fear made my hands shake. I used to lie awake at night listening to the blizzards batter the lodge. Snow would pile against the windows, and the rafters moaned like something alive. That's when I'd remember her voice. "Frostbite's coming to get you." I'd creep out of bed in my pajamas, tiptoe down the hall, and check the thermostat like she ordered. Sometimes it was at 40, sometimes lower. I'd shiver just looking at the number. Once, I asked David if it was true, if something really lived on the mountain. He glanced up from polishing one of his trophies and said, "Don't believe everything Elaine says. She likes scaring people." But then his eyes drifted toward the big picture window, toward the jagged outline of the tallest peak. For a second, his jaw tightened. He didn't say anything else, and that silence scared me more than Elaine's taunts. By the time I was 12, skiing was the only escape I had. We didn't live around other families. No kids my age, just tourists who came and went. I strapped on my skis whenever I could, racing down the slopes, heart hammering, cheeks burning from the cold. I got good. Good enough that David would sometimes glance out the window and mutter, almost to himself, "Decent form." That was the closest thing to praise he ever gave me. But skiing down was always easier than the long trudge back up. That was when the isolation hit hardest, carrying my skis through snowdrifts, the silence pressing in on me. I'd imagine eyes on me from the tree line. I'd imagine footprints appearing in the snow behind me. By my teens, I told myself I was over it. Frostbite was just a bedtime story. But deep down, every gust of wind through the branches still made me turn my head. One evening, after pushing myself too far down the slope, I was trudging back uphill when the sky blackened earlier than I expected. The temperature plummeted. My fingers went numb around the straps of my skis. That's when I saw the headlights. A Jeep crawled up the path behind me, tires crunching over the snow. My first instinct was relief until it occurred to me that no one should have been on that road at that hour. The window rolled down. A man leaned out. He was in his 30s, face weathered but strong, with an athlete's posture. You know David? He asked. Yeah, I said cautiously. He's my father. The man smiled like he'd expected that answer. Name's Mark. Used to compete in the same circuits as David. Haven't seen him in years. Hop in. I'll give you a lift. Something about him put me at ease. He wasn't a tourist. He spoke the language of the slopes. And the warmth spilling from the Jeep was too tempting to resist. Friend of David's. I explained quickly, not wanting her temper to flare in front of him. To my surprise, her lips curled into a smile. Well then, don't just stand out there in the cold. Come in. Inside, David's face lit up like I hadn't seen in years. He and Mark clasped hands, laughed, and immediately began swapping stories. I carried their coats, hung them on the rack, and lingered by the doorway. The night stretched on. They drank. They reminisced about races, near misses, injuries, victories. Then Mark leaned forward, his tone sharpening. Did you know I'm the world champion now? He asked. There's nobody left to challenge me. Nobody but you. David. Off the books. One mountain. One race. Let's see who's really the best. The room went quiet. David's gaze drifted toward the window, toward that cursed peak. His jaw clenched. That mountain, he muttered. Nobody's ever made it down alive. Mark smirked. Then let's be the first. Elaine's voice sliced through the tension. Is this a bet? What do we even get out of it? Not money, Mark said firmly. Just pride. Legacy. The love of the sport. David leaned back, a haunted look in his eyes. Then he raised his glass. All right. One mountain. Tomorrow morning. They clinked glasses, sealing the pact. I didn't sleep that night. Perfect thumbs up, thanks for confirming. I'll continue with part 2. 3. 4. V. Together about 500 more words to complete the full 6,000 word story. This will keep the pacing cinematic, with layered descriptions, dialogue, suspense, and emotional depth. Here we go. Search parties came and went. Helicopters circled the mountain for a few days, then gave up. The sheriff's office called it too dangerous, too steep, too costly. The Jeep was recovered, but no trace of either man was found. Elaine didn't shed a tear, at least not in front of me. Instead, she smoked twice as much, her lips curling as she muttered, Men and their pride. Pride'll bury you faster than the cold. But her cruelty toward me only grew sharper. I cooked her meals. I hauled in wood. I fixed the cracked pipes when they froze. She reminded me daily that I owed her for rescuing me from poverty. I kept skiing. It was all I had. But the mountain loomed larger in my mind. Every time I strapped on my boots, my eyes were drawn to that peak untouched, dangerous, and now haunted by the ghosts of David and Mark. By the time I turned 20, Elaine's body began to fail. Years of chain smoking left her coughing blood into tissues she stuffed under cushions to hide. But she clung to power. One winter night, while a blizzard pounded the windows, she called me to her room. Her voice was hoarse. Before I die, I need closure. About David. I want to know what happened to him. I told her the truth. Only the best skiers in the region have a shot at that slope. And even then, her eyes gleamed despite the sickness. Then bring them here. Let them prove it. I should have argued. But after a lifetime of servitude, defiance wasn't in my nature. I nodded. And that decision sealed everything that came after. 3 skiers arrived within days. Sean was the first, broad-shouldered, boyish grin, cocky in the way young men are when they've never been broken. Tyler followed, lean, restless, the type who mistook recklessness for bravery. And then there was Madison. The moment she stepped out of her truck, the snow swirling around her, I forgot how to breathe. Her presence was magnetic, her movements precise, controlled. She carried herself like someone who belonged to the mountain. When she tossed me her bags without a second glance, I didn't even mind. I'd carried worse for Elaine for years. At least Madison was beautiful. Elaine surprised me. She welcomed them with warmth I'd never seen. She spun her tale carefully. David had been old, confused. When he disappeared, she wanted his body recovered, or at least proof of his fate. Then she laid out the prize. Whoever skis the mountain and makes it down alive inherits the lodge when I'm gone. 50,000 cash if you bring me David's wedding ring. The room went still. Sean grinned like a kid handed candy. Tyler whistled low. Madison raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. I stood speechless. Years of my life bent beneath Elaine's cruelty, and she offered my inheritance to strangers. My fists clenched, but my tongue froze. Elaine glanced at me, smirked, and said, "Get our guests a drink." That evening, Elaine showed them the table I had prepared: body cams, tracking devices, flares, all borrowed from local contacts. "You'll wear these for proof," she said. They agreed without hesitation. Later, as snow howled outside, I lingered near the living room door, listening. Sean bragged about stunts he'd pulled in Colorado. Tyler laughed too loudly, egging him on. Madison asked quiet, focused questions about the terrain, the wind, the angle of descent. When she finally noticed me in the doorway, she said, "What about you? You ski?" I swallowed. "Yes, but not that mountain." Her eyes flickered with something: respect or pity. Before I could tell, she turned back to the fire. At dawn, the three of them strapped on their gear. The cameras went live, their feeds split across the lodge's monitor. I stood beside Elaine as she sipped brandy with a steady hand. Sean went first, whooping as he carved into the slope. His camera tilted wildly. A jump gone wrong. His scream was cut short by a sickening crunch against a boulder. The feed froze on red snow. I turned to call the sheriff. Elaine's hand gripped my wrist. Her nails dug into my skin. "Don't." Her eyes sparkled with a twisted amusement. Minutes later, Tyler's feed jolted. He flew through trees, laughing, until a branch speared through his chest. Blood sprayed the lens. The camera tilted sideways. Static buzzing. I gagged. Elaine chuckled. Boys and their toys. Madison moved slower. Her breathing came ragged over the speakers, but she remained cautious, scanning every angle. Eventually, her feed showed the mouth of a cave. She limped inside. Her scream echoed through the speakers. On the monitor, frozen in the ice, was a face. Mark. His jaw gnawed away. Skin gray. Eyes open in horror. Then the camera swung deeper into the cave and there he was. David. Only, not the man I remembered. His skin was blue. His lips cracked. His eyes bloodshot and wild. He was hunched over Mark's body, teeth tearing frozen flesh from bone. Madison choked back a sob. "Oh my God. He's alive. She's eating him." My heart stopped. Frostbite wasn't a monster. It was people. People starved and desperate enough to eat one another to survive. "Please." Madison cried into the mic. "Someone come get me. I can't make it back." Against every instinct, I grabbed my gear, strapped on a body cam, and headed for the mountain. The climb down was worse than I imagined. Wind howled. Snow blinded. My skis rattled under me. Sean's corpse was the first I saw, his skull crushed, blood frozen into crystals. Then Tyler, impaled grotesquely on a tree, his intestines draped like garland. I forced myself to keep moving. By the time I reached the cave, my stomach had hardened to gore. Madison lay shivering. Her skis shattered. Her lips trembled. "You came?" she whispered. "I'm here," I said, though my voice shook. I fashioned a sled from broken skis, lashed her onto it, and began dragging her down the mountain. Each step was torture. Days blurred together. We ate snow to survive. My body wasted away. Her face hollowed until she looked half dead. But finally the lodge appeared. I collapsed in the snow, muscles giving out. Madison stumbled to her feet, limping but determined. She looked down at me with a strange softness. "I'll come back for you," she said, and then she walked on without me. Hours later, I dragged myself inside. The smell of roast beef hit me like salvation. My knees buckled. I followed it into the kitchen only to find empty plates. Scraps of gravy dried and hard. Elaine appeared in the doorway, cigarette dangling from her lips. She tossed a ring onto the counter. David's wedding ring. Madison found it. She said smugly, "She wins. You lose. I didn't make food for losers." Her laughter burrowed into my skull. Something inside me cracked. Rage and hunger fused into one. I lunged. My teeth sank into her throat. Her scream choked on blood. The taste warm, coppery, intoxicating drove me mad. I tore at her until nothing remained but bones. I licked blood from my hands, my vision swimming red. In the hallway mirror, my reflection stopped me cold. Blue skin, bloodshot eyes, my chin dripping crimson. For the first time, I understood. Frostbite wasn't a legend. It was me. I buried Elaine in the snow, cleaned the blood, burned the evidence. When Madison asked, I said Elaine had left. She believed me. She inherited the lodge. She became the mistress of the estate. And I stayed, cooking her meals, serving her wine, watching her smile when she ate. I am her servant now, and I've never felt more alive. Because once you've tasted human flesh, you can never go back. The mountain still looms outside the window, the peak untouched, the snow falling. They call it cursed. They whisper about frostbite. But I know the truth. The monster isn't hiding up there. It's right here, wearing my face. And when hunger calls again, I will answer. So I ask you, the ones still listening, what do you think? Is violence ever justified when survival is on the line? Was Elaine's cruelty worse than what I became? Or does hunger erase morality altogether? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your stance on violence, injustice, and what desperation does to the human spirit. Because maybe, just maybe, as scariest monsters aren't in the legends. They're in us.